Okay, you may begin whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another Earth Week event. We're very excited and honored to have Mary Hogue with us today. Mary is on the Fairfield Conservation Commission and also on Sustainable Fairfield. She's been doing this for a little while, and she's also a composting expert. I started composting this past year, and I hang my head in shame that I hadn't started sooner. You'd be surprised how much adds up from just scraps. And it's really important to do that and get it out of the stream that we're throwing out in the trash. So I won't take up too much of your time, but I just want to mention that at the end, we'll be taking questions and we'll be raffling off this nice little compost bin for your countertop. Lucky winner. So thanks again, Mary. Take it away.
Hey everyone, I'm going to share my screen so that we can look at my presentation here. And here we go. So let's just move this out of the way. So welcome to my presentation. So what's this all about? This is a quote that a friend of mine shared with me, and it sort of pulls it all together. Teresa Pesek is a composter down in New York City. They have this wonderful composting program. And in the cacophony of life crises, I debated the reality of composting. Recycling our food is more than waste management. It's recognizing that sometimes the best solutions may not be glitzy technology, but the humility to harness the intelligence of nature. So basically, for me, this means let's not fight nature, look at nature and follow its lessons. And let's see what we can do to learn from nature and mimic it. And that's really what composting is doing. So the circle of life, what I want to show you here is the overall process. So let's watch this for about 2.5 minutes.
Why is biodegradation essential for the balance of nature? In nature, all living organisms contain an element essential for life, which helps form compounds known as organic materials. For example, plants feed off the carbon dioxide gas present in the atmosphere via photosynthesis. When they die, any carbon in them is returned to the natural environment, thanks to a process called biodegradation. First, the organic material decomposes into smaller parts through the action of physical environmental factors, such as the wind or sun, and biological factors, such as the billions of living organisms, earthworms, and fungi. Once sufficiently broken down into organic matter, it is then gradually digested by microorganisms, such as bacteria. In the final stage, called bioassimilation, all that remains is carbon dioxide, which is released back into the atmosphere, water, and carbon-rich organic matter called biomass or humus, which helps fertilize the soil and stimulates the growth of new plants. Biodegradation depends on the characteristics of the organic material. This material must first be biodegradable, that is to say, digestible by microorganisms. How long biodegradation takes depends on the composition and size of the material. The more it is broken down and the greater the surface area available to microorganisms, the quicker the biodegradation process. The time it takes also depends on several other factors: the quantity and diversity of microorganisms, as well as the humidity, temperature, and presence of oxygen. These factors can differ from one environment to another. Industrial composting and home composting are optimal man-made environments for the biodegradation of food and garden waste. They offer good oxygenation, controlled humidity, and a higher temperature that encourages microorganism activity, which reduces the time needed for biodegradation. By its very soil is the natural environment which favors biodegradation the most. The length of time depends on the concentration of microorganisms, the type of soil, plus climate, and at scale, fresh water and have a lower concentration of microorganisms offer less favorable conditions for biodegradation, which then takes longer. What is done by photosynthesis is undone by biodegradation, which uses its regenerative power to maintain fertility and quality. So let's promote it.
Okay, so that's the whole process, and then we'll break it down a little bit.
Why is biodegradation?
Stop. So what is composting? So as I said, it's decomposition, or in a word, it's rot. But really, I think it's just gorgeous. It's all sorts of things. It's mushrooms. It's a nurse log. You can see this log here has new trees growing out of it. It's all sorts of beautiful different colors and textures. I don't know where to put you that you're not going to be in the way, but it's happening all around us. So even if you've never heard of composting, you just started doing it, you've never done it before, compost exists whether you participate in it or not. Nature is doing it all the time. So now you get to participate in it too. So can you compost incorrectly? Not really. It's going to happen. Maybe more slowly than you, but it's going to happen. So I really want to encourage people to not beat yourself up. Something that I get all the time, you know, how can I do it right? You know, everyone gets very, very nervous about composting. Really, it's going to take place. People talk about, you know, well, what did I do wrong? And I sort of joke that nature makes mistakes, you know, with a low tide or a small pond, you know, it turns into a mud flat. It's kind of get stinky. And that's because it's lacking air. It's going anaerobic. Or sometimes the soil is very, very dry and it needs moisture. Composting is always happening within the soil. So you can fix these mistakes the same way that nature does. If it smells bad, that means it's too wet. It's lacking air because the air pockets are filled up with the water. So you just have to dry it out, and you have to mix to get the throughout compost. If it's too dry, then you wet it down. And again, you want to mix it up because you want to mix that water throughout, and you want to mix it up to get the air in there. So it's really that simple. And what soil? Compost soil, they're really basically the same thing in that you're trying to get those microbes and that bacteria in there. And we've been taught that bacteria is bad, but truly bacteria, we can't live without bacteria. We can't digest our food without bacteria. The plant can't actually digest their own food, microbes and bacteria. They don't directly get their nutrition without the help of these microorganisms and bacteria. So soil is a complex mixture of all sorts of things. And there are more microorganisms in a teaspoon of soil than there are on all the people of Earth. So it's very, very busy with all sorts of things going on. And the one to note is it takes a very, very long time to make soil. So by putting compost on our soil, actually helping to keep our soil healthy. And also I want to point out that it took me a long time to learn and understand all this. So everybody starts at some point. So don't feel badly if any of this or some of this is new to you. It was new to me at one as well. So kudos to you for starting to take an interest in this and learning it. It was very shocking to me to learn that most of the chemicals that people put on their lawns are made out of oil. Why in the world would you think to put, you know, oil-based products on your lawn? Of course, it's going to kill the bacteria and the microorganisms. So let's put the microorganisms themselves on our landscape. The main focus for me is to try and figure out how can we stop wasting things and rethink things, think of them as resources. So this for me is probably the most important slide in my presentation, and hopefully rethinking how we look at things can be very important. So waste is something that's useful that goes unused. So all that food that we don't eat and we put in the compost is now going to be used instead of going into the garbage. So that returning that, what was a waste is now a resource. So that's really the point of this slide. So just think of that's the point of this slide for me. And another thing to consider is that it has this food recovery hierarchy, which a lot of people, even in the world, have never heard of. And I want to point out that as you go down, it's least preferred. So as you go down, you can see that compost is the second to last item on this list. So I'm not encouraging you to compost as much as possible. I'm actually encouraging you to compost as little as possible. So the top priority is to buy as little food as you need. Don't overbuy food. So it's a new way of thinking. So plan out your menu for the week. If you happen to buy more food than you need for the week, think about doing things that leftovers, make soup, make bread, share it with other people. Perhaps if you can't share it people you know, then share it with the food banks. If you have animals, if you have people that have farms, share it with those animals. Yeah, I don't know if there are industrial uses that are local to you. Sometimes there are, but not so much in our neck of the woods. And then, only then do we go to the compost section. So it's just something, again, about the best use for a resource. So something to consider. You can download, we have them in our refrigerator at home. So we have this as something to remind us. You can download that from the website. And just to help remind you, or as a tool, there is a webinar that is from the EPA that you can get on, and I'll just stay on here if you want to copy this URL right here. And if the library has your email, I can just link people to register on the 23rd at 3:30. There's this webinar that has information and demos on how to prevent and reduce wasted food. And again, it's teaching you how to do things with leftovers. And it also will talk about composting, and we'll talk about these kinds of terms down here in just a minute. And here we are the 3 types of composting. So we're finally composting. So there are 3 types of composting. The composting is what you'll be doing at home mostly. That's air. There's anaerobic compost, so that's without air. A lot of people, more in the cities, will do that because they don't have the space. They don't have the place to do aerobic composting. In Connecticut, in Southington, we have quantum bio mechanics where they actually do this. This actually is mimicking our stomachs. Our stomach is an anaerobic composter, and it uses bacteria. It's an enclosed vessel, and it covers the methane, and it uses that methane as a fuel source. And it's good that it captures methane. Methane is 4 times as powerful a greenhouse gas as carbon dioxide. So it's good to capture methane. They use that methane to power their plant, and a lot of places that capture the methane can use that methane to power their poles and all sorts of things. And then they take the resulting compost, which needs to be aerobically composted afterwards. And then the third kind is vermicomposting with worms. In the video that we saw in the beginning, they talked about how the temperature and the seasons affect how quickly compost happens. So as you might imagine, here in the Northeast, composting can be kind of slow in the winter. Depending on the mass or the size of your pile, it can get hot, be hot enough to keep going. Those microorganisms and bacteria are very, very busy in the middle of your pile. But if your pile is not very big, it can actually freeze. And so therefore it stops composting. So what some people do to keep composting all year long is they'll have composting with worms, and the worms have to be inside. They will freeze as well. So I do have composting with worms down in my basement, and they're like pets. They're like us. They have to have water, just like the microbes and the bacteria. They're living beings. They need to have enough water, enough air. They need to have food, and they have to have enough shelter. So those are the things that all of us need. That's what they need as well. So compost basics, it's really not that hard. It sounds like chemistry, but it's really just by your eye. You need to have a 3-to-1 ratio. So you need to have browns, which are the carbon, which are dry, like crunchy brown leaves from the fall. Okay. Then you need to have, which are, so they're the wet stuff, the food from your kitchen. They're the grass clippings. So actually, if you can keep your grass clippings on your lawn, then you don't have to do anything to add nitrogen. You're just leaving that green or the nitrogen on your lawn. So we don't usually suggest you put the green grass clippings into your compost. But you do a 3-to-1 of browns or carbon to nitrogen in your compost bin. So as you can see here, this is, well, this is cloth, but you can use wire and you can just make a circle of it. You can do any kind of bin you want. You can buy a bin. This one is just a circle that someone made. But you can see that this is vented. So this is making sure there's air. They've got obviously a lot of brown, which is good. It looks pretty dry, so you probably could maybe put a hose in there. It's outside. It looks like it's on the ground. And this way you can put a pitchfork in there, or you can get an auger. Can't really see me. You can't see anybody. Here we go. So an auger looks like a big screw, and you screw it down into the compost bin, and then you yank it up. And in this narrow enclosure, that would be probably my choice. You can have bins that you rotate, and that's it up. So what happens if you don't rotate it, what happens is as you keep layering, the bottom part gets very heavy. So that way it squishes out the air, and then the critters on the bottom, critters, their microbes and the bacteria, get squished out and they can't breathe anymore. So that's the point of making sure that you bring that stuff up and the stuff on the top goes down, and you keep rotating that pile. It also means that that the stuff that is being getting the most microorganisms and bacteria go into the part that have the least, so that you're rotating those microorganisms and bacteria throughout. So the other thing that people ask is, how often do I have to start a new pile, or when can I get my finished compost out? Well, if you keep adding new stuff, you're never going to have a finished compost. So some people will have 3 bins, and the logic is that you fill up the first pile, you move to the next one and leave the first pile alone. And by the time you start the third one, your first pile's done. That usually takes about a year. Or you can, what I do is I have my bin, I clean it out in the spring and keep filling it up all year long. And by the time the next spring comes out, I'm ready to take it. So I just have one bin and do it that way. To start a compost bin, you can just take a handful of soil, because all those microbes are busy. If it's a nice healthy soil from a forest floor or somewhere that's healthy, that's a compost starter. You don't have to buy a compost starter if you don't want to. If you already have a compost bin, take a handful of compost from your existing compost, or someone who has a compost bin, that's your compost starter. So you don't need to go out and buy something that says compost starter. What are woods, or I'm sorry, what are browns? We get this question a lot. So browns are, I've done is I have a garbage bin that I fill with a bunch of fall leaves, And every time I go out to my bin, I have my my bin, which is the same bin that we're raffling off. It's a wonderful bin. It has a filter so that you don't have to run out every time you fill it up. It has a little carbon filter in your kitchen. I fill it up. I put it into my compost inside. Take a handful of the dried leaves and I cover up the food that I've just put in, and I fill it up so that it covers my food. That's 3 times as deep as my food. And then if I feel like it, if it's not too much trouble, I'll circulate my compost. So in other words, it's not hard. It doesn't take a lot of forethought. I don't have to overthink things. And I keep an eye on it. As I keep putting food and leaves in, I check it out and I notice that every time I put it in, it seems to have decreased more than I thought it would. And that's because the microbes are eating. And as they eat things, it's lowering the level. So it's almost a losing battle. Every time you think you filled your bin, the microbes have cut the size down over time. So you never really get to finish filling up your bin. To really get to the level of the ability to make a bin to be at the level where, I'm going to close this so you can see everything, to get to the level where you would be hot enough of a post pile to be able to compost like meat. It would be a very, very big pile, and it'd be very unlikely that a family would produce enough food scraps that you could get there. So here are some compost tips that I want to share with you. I did get fruit flies, and that was very disappointing and frustrating and icky. And without fail, if you bananas, you will get fruit flies unless you freeze them. They're within the peels. And in fact, if you freeze all your fruits and vegetables, it will really speed up the composting process, because the thawing of the organic matter is so degrades I can't talking too fast. It so degrades the structure of those vegetables and fruit that it will speed it up considerably, but because it also makes it very mushy, you'll have to have a lot more dry material. Anaerobic and vermicomposting really encourages the microorganisms and the bacteria to eat from the perimeter. So more that you in your compost, the smaller, the faster they will be able to get through those pieces. So that's another way to speed up your process. Some people I've heard put them in the blender, and then again, that makes a pretty slushy mess. So again, that will require more dry material as well. And as I mentioned, if you're composting at home, don't do meat or fish. Dairy and fats also are very hard to break down, and all of those will also be bad for your compost outside, because it will draw animals to your bin, and don't want that either. And citrus can be a problem because it can make the compost acidic, and be a problem if you're doing composting. That can be harmful for worms. But the main point is that you're a microbe farmer, so you can think of it as little new pets, and you're feeding your microbes. So you want to keep them watered, you want to give them enough oxygen, and you want to feed them. And if you keep them happy, they will make your compost for you. So that's really the point. And just to give you an idea of, when we go up and we get compost out Connecticut, this is how it could possibly look within who knows how long. But you can see how long it took for them in Italy. So I don't know if there's anything else that I have. Stop. Oh, okay, yes. So this is a slide about the Master Composter Program. They hold it once a year. They've already completed the 2021 course. And again, this is the slide that has a website on it. If you look up UConn Master Composter, that's how you can find it. So you have to really know how to get to it with this particular URL. If you just look up UConn Master Composter, you'll get there. And they have wonderful fact sheets. If you go to, where's the, okay. Anyway, this is that you really want to know about. If you go to this, and if you're a garden soil test, because before you start this you should do a test, really expensive. And then that way you can tell if you need to add any minerals to your soil. And you can see all the different things that you can do. And you can see there's all sorts of information about composting on here. So it's a really great site for getting information about composting and all sorts of other information. So I just want to share that with you. That's the site for you. And it talks all about the different types of compost bins and how to build them and all sorts of other information. So I just, that's part of the Master Gardener group as well. And in case you want to reach me, I'm happy to answer any questions at any time after this, in case you don't think of anything. Most of the way I like to do this is to actually not do too much talking, but more open it up for questions, more of a dialogue, which is a little hard to do via Zoom. So I'm gonna maybe do it this way. I'm going to stop sharing actually, but I just want to leave that up for long enough for you to write it down. But it's pretty straightforward, Sustainable Fairfield Task Force at Gmail. And that's a Google phone number, which will ring on my cell phone. Okay.
All right.
So I'll stop sharing. Hopefully you got that down.
We're recording this and all the attendees will get a copy of the link for our YouTube channel. So they'll be able to see and watch it again. And then for those who were wondering, I am going to open it up to questions, but first I want to share my screen and show you something here. Hold on one second. If you were wondering, how do I compost at home? I really don't have the space for it, or I don't want to do it. I don't know how to do it. There is a company called Curbside Compost, which you should be seeing right now on my screen. You go to Google, type in Curbside Compost. They're a local group, and they will pick up a bin of your food scraps and they will compost them for you. So I know that they have several customers already in Trumbull. And with them as a commercial composter, you can do much more than just fruit and vegetables. So that might be an option for you if you don't want to do your own.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if you noticed in the Italy video, they were putting fish in there. So that's got the same idea. That's because it goes to an industrial composter. So yeah, and I believe Action Waste Services, they may come to Trumbull as well. I don't know. That's
not yet. Yes.
Oh, not yet. Okay.
We've spoken to them, but I don't think they have any subscribers here yet. So Curbside is the one that's active, but Action Waste is another one that I think they're comparable price-wise.
Mm-hmm.
So does anyone have any questions about composting or anything else for Mary?
I also just want to point out back to that resource versus waste. So when you think of it in terms of weight, 40% of our waste stream is food. And if you think about that, that's amazing. And we pay for that. That's out of our pocket. So if you want to just think in terms of how much money you pay, that literally is wasting money right off the bat. And I joke with people, if you think about it, if you have a roaring fire in your fireplace, Would you throw a head of lettuce in that fire? That would make no sense, right? That's just the silliest question, because we burn our garbage. That's why I ask it that way. We burn our garbage in Connecticut. So why in the world would you throw this wet food waste into the incinerator when you can actually take it and you can use it to make the soil amendment and the soil product that is so powerfully good for the environment? So let's turn it into a resource and let's stop wasting it. Let's stop wasting our money. Stop wasting and creating all this carbon, this extra carbon monoxide from the trucks, the extra trucks going to Bridgeport. It's just, all of it's so silly. It's so easy to do. So just want to point that one out too.
Yeah, good point. So I don't see any questions yet. So I think we can go ahead and do the raffle for this fabulous little compost bin. I'm going to share my screen again. And to those who signed up, there are more people who signed up than attended, but everyone who attended is on this wheel. So thank you very much.
Wow, this is cool.
Isn't it?
Oh, where'd you get this thing? That's fun.
Joanna, congratulations. I will email you separately.
Wow, confetti, yay.
Confetti and fireworks. I will email you, Joanna, to line up a delivery of the item. I want to thank you again, Mary, for being here today and for giving your time. I know you're very, very busy, and I want to thank everyone else who signed up to join us at noon today. So thanks, everyone. And if you have any questions at all, feel free to email us back. Have a good day.